sure that I had the opportunity to share one story out of the many in my life that have come to be and become a part of me over the last 3 or 4 years that I've started to really grow up and really end up in situations where I step out with God. You've already heard several stories about how God has really, really impacted my life. But I'd like to take a minute and tell you about something that happened to me a year and 1 month ago, almost to the day. So a year and 1 month ago, I was going into my senior year at Hillsdale College. It was my last year, and I had only been there for 2 before. I was only going to be there for 3 years, so there was an extra sense of pressure on this particular time. I was a senior before all of my friends, and I was going on to what I thought was going to be the end of an illustrious career at that school. 7 of my friends and I had all decided to get together and rent a house. We were so excited. We were going to rent this cute house and have it be our live-in situation. I was going to be the senior. All of my friends were juniors because it was all of our 3rd year. And we were all going to live together. And we had plans to have tea cozies and to throw parties. And it was just fantastic. We selected this little house off about a block away from the campus. That was adorable. We went with the landlady, and she said that what she was going to do was over the summer, she was going to gut the house entirely, and she was going to redo it. She showed us the pictures off Pinterest that she was going to use to redesign our house and how it was all going to look, and we were all so delighted. It was probably the one thing that I told my friends and family about the most as I was preparing to return to Hillsdale College. I was so excited, right? So 2 days before I get back, everything's perfect. I'm in Michigan. I'm with another friend. And I call my best friend, Valerie, my roommate. And I said, Val, have you moved to the house yet? How's the house? And she goes, well, Anna, you're not going to like this. I go, what do you mean? And she says, it's not done yet. And I go, okay, well, I mean, it's still a house, right? And she goes, no, you don't understand. She says, there's no trim, there's no doorknobs, there's no kitchen, there's no washing machines, and I'm suspecting that there may not be adequate insulation in the walls. So I'm concerned, right? Actually, I'm beyond concerned. Let's be honest. I was pretty furious because this was my perfect senior year, and this was my idea where I was going to live with all of my girlfriends. We were going to have this wonderful experience. So I show up a couple days later, and I'm kind of concerned, and I walk into the house, and everything Valerie said was true. It was like summer camp. I didn't have bed, I literally didn't have a doorknob on my door. And there was no trim, and there was no washing machine, and there was no kitchen. There were girls in my house who had special dietary needs, who needed to have access to a stove, and there was no stove. So, a couple days go by. I become the self-appointed envoy to the landlady to talk about this. Classes are starting on Wednesday. By now it's Thursday. 1 day has gone by. The landlady shows up at our house to drink coffee and sit on the porch. And I come out to the landlady, and I went, well, I believe we signed a contract at the beginning of the school year. Back in June, we actually came to this agreement, and I actually have a copy of the contract. And I want to be polite, and I want to be very respectful, but I also want to be very clear that I don't think that this is an acceptable living situation according to our contract. And I think that if we continue to live in this place, we should have some sort of concessions made on our rent. And this woman actually laughed at me. So I left. That very day, I started repacking my boxes. And this is horrible. Let me just impress upon you how horrible the situation was. It was the first day of classes on my senior year at a class that is rated on a difficulty level with Yale and Harvard. It was obscene. I had a super heavy class load, and I just was not up to the task of moving right now. And on top of all of that, I had nowhere to put any of my things. I was repacking everything in boxes, and I literally did not have a place to live. All I knew was that I was leaving. But you know what it is like when you're a believer. So I started laying in bed at night and dreaming to myself of all the cool stories that my parents told me when I was a little kid. And I started thinking to myself about stories that I heard of my mom moving to New York and getting a job and a place to stay and a full set of furniture in a week. And I remember stories that my father told me about hitchhiking across the United States when he was young, in 26 hours or whatever it was. All these ridiculous, incredible stories of God meeting people's needs. And I literally got excited. And in the midst of, I'm not going to say I didn't cry. Crying is my thing. But, but I was excited because I just knew there's only one way that this is going to have to turn out, and it's going to turn out well. So I'm really excited. So I started trying to figure it out. I got together with 2 of my other girlfriends, and there were 3 of us now, and we all decided to move out together. We all decided this was unacceptable. So we're all getting together to move out, and I'm all excited. I can just see how this is going to work out. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to have these 3 girls get together, and it's going to be my closest friends, because it was just my closest friends, and we're all going to get an apartment together, and it's going to be lovely, and it's going to be better, because apartments are less expensive, and we'll be able to afford the entire thing between the 3 of us, and it'll be cute, and we can decorate it however we wanted, and we'll be closer to campus, and everything will be great. And then 2 days later, my friends told me that they had changed their mind, and that I was the only one leaving. I called my parents up, inconsolable. My friends have hung me out to dry, and I don't know what to do, and I'm the only one who's leaving, and it's humiliating, and it's the first week of classes, and I don't even know what to do. And my parents, because my parents are great, my parents go, Anna, calm down. We will pay the extra money for you to get a single room on campus. So let me give you a little bit more of this picture here, okay? Now, the original reason that I had wanted to move out was because I wanted to have a house on my own, and I wanted to have roommates. Now, I gave up the opportunity to have a roommate on campus so that I could live off campus. I was excited because it was going to be way less expensive. So here comes this situation, and the only save we have is for me to live how? Without a roommate, and it's going to cost twice as much money as it would have before. That's not what I was thinking of. But it says in the Word that all things work together to them that love God, right? So I'm like, okay, this is going to work out somehow. I don't know how, but it just is. It's going to be great. And I went into this little room, and I had my own little one-person room all by myself, and I could go to bed as early as I wanted to, and I could get up as early as I wanted to, and I could play my music as loud as I wanted to. Turned out that a friend of mine lived a couple doors down, and it actually turned out to an okay situation. And then 2 months later, it was such an okay situation that 2 months later, when a woman that I had met at a gas station called me and told me that she'd like to give me a house, I turned her down. Back when this whole thing had started to go down, that whole weekend where I was just trying to find a place to live, I was trying to live my life, I was walking around filled with the Spirit and the light of God, just knowing that everything I went to and every door that opened, I was just waiting for my miracle to come through it. I was at a gas station, and this older woman goes, excuse me, can you help me with this button? And she's like, I can't find the start button. So I go over to this woman, and I introduce myself to her, and she goes, oh, are you a student of the college? It's this kind of older woman. And I go, yes, I am. And she goes, what are you doing today? I'm like, here it is, it's my miracle. And I go, well, ma'am, I'm looking for a house. You see, I've lost my living situation, and I don't have anywhere to live. So I just told her the whole story right then and there, and she just kind of went, oh, well, that's just stupid. And I was like, well, all right, I guess that's not the one I'm looking for. But you know what? Anyway, here, ma'am, here's my card. It's a pleasure to meet you. And I walked off, and I completely forgot all about it. So this woman sends me an email 2 months later, and she says, my husband and I, every year, we take in a senior. We take in a senior. Hold on to those words. We take in a senior. And we give them free room and board. And we were wondering if you would like to be our senior. And I go, no, I'm really happy, ma'am, with everything that's going on right here. I send her an email back, and I politely turn down her offer. And then I'm on the phone with my mom that night, and I go, so this happened today, and this woman that I met at the gas station, I guess her and her husband, and I tell her about the whole situation, and my mom goes, you need to look at this, because you need to leave no stone unturned, because housing forms are due in 2 weeks. So I go, okay, I call this woman up, and I go over to their house, and this woman accepts me into the door, and I say, how much does this cost? And she says, nothing. And I say, and you're going to live here, you and your husband, with me, right? And she says, no, you're the only person who will live in the house. And I say, how much are the utilities? And she says, they're nothing, because we're going to pay for the utilities for you. We we have all the bills forwarded to our house in Texas. And I say, where's the catch? And her husband goes, let me show you how to use your flat screen TV. And I just literally started to cry. I ended up moving literally in the month of November. I took all my stuff and moved into a house that square footage is bigger than the house that I grew up in with my family of 5 when I was a kid. It was insane. The house had a little conservatory and an enormous yard and a big screen TV that was hooked up to the internet and had Netflix on it. And I had this ridiculous music system that I could play off of my iPod and 2 guest rooms so that I could have friends come over and visit anytime. I was sort of belatedly trying to convince them that I would be mature and responsible with it because, they'd already given it to me. They didn't even know my last name. And I'm going, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I promise it won't have parties or anything in it. And they go, oh no, have parties. It was so absurd. It was, when my parents came for graduation that year, they had their own room to stay in, they had their own house to stay in, and then I had a neighbor kid mow the yard so that I could throw an enormous graduation day bash with about 50 visitors at my own house for free. God is good. That was my story. Later on, I found out that had I not moved off campus and then moved back on campus because of the way the paperwork worked out, there was no way I would have been able to move to the house. So all things do work together for good to them that love God. Everybody open your Bibles to the book of Habakkuk. Habakkuk, for the record, is 5 books before Matthew. It's one of the minor prophets. Chapter 3, verse 17 through 19. Tiffany, read it.
Although the fig tree shall not blossom, neither shall fruit be in the vines, the labor of the olive shall fail, and the field shall yield no meat. The flock shall be cut off from the fold, and there shall be no herd in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation. The Lord God is my strength, and he will make my feet like hinds' feet, and he will make me to walk upon my high places. To the chief singer on my string instruments.
So there is so much to unpack in this sort of 3-verse section. The book of Habakkuk is really interesting. I was just reading it earlier today because it's very sort of sad and tremulous and scary. And then at the very end of the book, this beam of light and hope shines out of it. And that is what we just looked at, was these 3 verses. So, in verse 17, Habakkuk sets up a sort of a horrible problem that to our modern eyes may not be incredibly difficult, but really spoke to the people of the time. Because the Israelites, the Jews, lived in an agrarian economy, which means that they basically grew everything. So for us, we can imagine the fig tree. Have you ever seen a fig tree in person? Anyways, so we can imagine the fig tree, but we don't have one in your backyard. Do you have
No,
one?
I had one in my backyard when I lived in Mississippi.
That's awesome.
It didn't really produce fruit in the entire time we were there.
It was like this fig
It was
tree.
not very big.
All right.
It actually was really more of a fig bush. It was very,
It was
very
a
small,
big bush.
but it was pretty cool looking.
So anyway, so it's interesting because the prophet here gives us 3 or 4, like a sort of a sequence of things that are horrible. Although the fig tree shall not blossom, and it's not putting these necessarily, I looked at the grammar of it, it's not in the imperative, he's putting it as a very likely possibility from the way that he's wording this. So although the fig tree shall not blossom, now the fig tree to the people of the time was basically sweets. The fig tree shall not blossom, neither shall fruit be in the vines. This would be the next step down from sweets. The labor of the olive shall fail. Now we're getting into something sort of important. The olive tree provided oil for the people of the time. And so for them, that was the light of their house. They put that on their faces and in their hair. So it's getting more important. And then it continues, and the fields to wheat and barley and those sorts of agrarian ideals. And that would be very important foodstuffs as well. And then the flock shall be cut up from the fold, and there shall be no herd in the stalls. It's sort of, do you see how it's sort of progressing in an importance of kind of difficulty? And still, I know a lot of this to our modern eyes doesn't mean necessarily as much. For us, this would be like an EMP. Did you get that reference? Okay.
Electromagnetic
Yeah,
pulse.
an
Taking out all the internet and everything.
Pulse. Exactly. Exactly. That's for us. That's the best kind of a parallel that we can find for their particular situation. And yet, in verse 18, he says, "Yet," with this very sort of pivotal phrase. "Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation." He says, "The Lord God is my strength, and he will make my feet like hinds' feet, and he will make me to walk upon mine high places." I think this phrase is really interesting. He will make me to walk upon mine high places, for a couple of reasons. I found difficulty finding a specific reason for why the phrase high places refers to as mine high places, because there are different translations. But if you take it, to walk upon mine high places, that's a really beautiful idea. Not to just do things that are difficult, but to do things that are difficult for me. And so there's a sense in which this is very metaphorical. He will make me, God will lead me upon these really great high places that are difficult for me. The hind, it refers, is a type of a small red female deer that is, I believe, the most sure-footed animal on earth. So that's extraordinary. He will make me to walk upon mine high places. In my house, I don't remember where, but it's one of those things where every time I walk out of a door, it's at eye level, so I must have seen it 100 times. There's this book, and it's called Do Hard Things. In, I believe, the early 2000s, maybe the late 90s, a young man named Josh Harris wrote a book called I Kissed Dating Goodbye that immediately became just super famous. And after Josh Harris came along with I Kissed Dating Goodbye, I suppose that somebody thought that his little brothers should write something too. And so his younger brothers, who are twins, their names are Alex and Brett Harris, wrote this book, and it's called Do Hard Things. And I don't really remember much of the book, I'm going to be totally honest. But that idea, do hard things. What I do remember is that the major thesis sort of the book is that Christian individuals should consider themselves called to difficult situations and to rise up. They were talking about it in, the sense of political activism and of organizing in your church and of standing up to be a leader. And that stuff is really, it's wonderful and it's important, and it's a valid part of many of our lives as leaders in the church. Nevertheless, there's another aspect of that stuff that we all have to consider, is that it's completely optional. But I'll tell you about things that aren't optional. I could literally just take that phrase, do hard things, and just switch it so that now it says face hard things. Because everybody does. We were just talking earlier tonight about some situations that have happened in our lives and in the lives of those around us. And many of us have been through them before. And facing hard things is something that we all go through. The question is, when you face hard things, what do you do? Do you rise up and do you do hard things? Or do you allow yourself to be overcome by what's going on in your life? Really quick, we'll go to Ecclesiastes chapter 9. Ecclesiastes is right after Psalms and Proverbs. Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 11 says, I returned, and I saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, neither yet bread to the wise, nor yet riches to men of understanding, nor yet favor to men of skill, but time and chance happens to them all. You could essentially summarize this and say, I returned and I saw under the sun that life isn't fair. And that's true, is that it isn't fair to all of us. But how do we deal with this? I know that we're all here in a situation where we're here tonight because we're interested in learning and sort of bringing fruit in our lives of the godly way to handle things. You don't need to turn to it, but I'm going to take us to 1 Peter chapter 4. 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 12 says, "Beloved, think it not strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened unto you. But rejoice, inasmuch as you're partakers of Christ's sufferings, that when his glory shall be revealed, ye may be glad also with exceeding joy." Back when I went to Hillsdale College, Dr. Arnn is president of Hillsdale College. He's an incredible man. He's one of my heroes. He's one of my favorite people. And he told me that if you want to be great, what you should do is take the lives of 3 great people who are well recorded and study them. So my 3 great people are Jesus, number 1, because of the way he loved people and because he's Jesus. Number 2, Winston Churchill, because of his courage in the face of social opposition and his eloquence. He was great. And number 3 is Elijah. So we're going to go look a little bit at one of my heroes. And it isn't Winston Churchill. Turn to 1 Kings. 1 Kings chapter 17. And now we have this kind of interesting interplay of the relationship. We're going to look a little bit at the relationship of God to man before Jesus Christ. And then we're going to look a little bit at the relationship of God to man after Jesus Christ and compare the two, even amongst one of my heroes. 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 17. Alicia? No, Alicia doesn't have a Bible. Tiffany, read it.
And it came to pass after these things that the son of the woman, the mistress of the house, fell sick, and his sickness was so sore that there was no breath left in him. Do I keep going?
Yes, until 22.
Okay. And she said unto Elijah, What have I to do with thee, O thou man of God? Art thou come unto me to call my sin to remembrance and to slay my son? And he said unto her, Give me thy son. And he took him out of her bosom and carried him up into a loft, where he abode, and laid him upon his own bed. And he cried unto the Lord, and said, O Lord my God, hast thou also brought evil upon the widow with whom I sojourn, by slaying her son? And he stretched himself upon the child 3 times, and cried unto the Lord, and said, O Lord my God, I pray thee, let this child's soul come into him again. And the Lord heard the voice of Elijah, and the soul of the child came into him again, and he revived.
This is one of the incredible things that Elijah did, was a part of. If we fast forward one chapter, I'm going to summarize a whole chapter for you pretty quickly in the life of Elijah. So Elijah called together the people with the 450 prophets of Baal, because the prophets of Baal were essentially preying upon the children of Israel. And so he got them all together, and he essentially laid out a bet, the most epic bet. I think it's probably happened in the course of history. So he decided, they all got together, and they each slayed a bullock and put it on an altar. And he let the prophets of Baal go first, and he said, here's what we're going to do. You dress it, and you put it on the altar, and then you pray and do whatever you want to until noonday. That's how long you have. And then we'll see if anything happens. He said, and then I'll go, and then we'll really see what happens. And if I'm right, and my God sets the bullock on fire, then my God wins, essentially. So what happened was, of course, was that the prophets of Baal beat themselves upon their heads and smote their breasts and cried and prayed and all of this, and nothing happened. And then Elijah came, and Elijah slew a bullock by himself in the word. No one else would help him. This man is a BOSS boss. So he slew the bullock, he dressed it, he put it on the altar. He had them bring forth 3 different tankards of water to pour all around the altar. Water, mind you. And then he prayed, and he spoke to the heavens. Fire comes down, consumes the altar and the bullock, and licks up the water all around it, right? So Elijah, being not tired at all, because he's Elijah and he's incredible, he to bring together the 450 prophets of Baal, and he took them down by the river, and he slew all of them. What an incredible man. But then, turn to chapter 19. So then Ahab tells Jezebel, the evil queen, all that Elijah has done, and Jezebel sends a messenger to Elijah and tells him that he's going to die. And Elijah, in verse 4, says, "But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a juniper tree, and he requested for himself that he might die, and said, 'It is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am not better than my fathers.'" In this particular instance, I hope to be better than Elijah. Elijah just finished up being a total boss and slaying 450 people who were preying upon his people after he stood up completely and totally alone in front of all the Israelites and all of these 450 prophets of Baal who were actively standing against him, and basically made a bet about God, and has this incredible courage. Then he runs a distance of 20 miles to get away from Jezebel, and then, I wish this were different, is he laid under a juniper tree and he requested that he might die. And this is an important aspect of the Old Testament relationship of man to God that we kind of have to remember and consider, is that Elijah lived under the law. Elijah didn't have a Savior, Jesus Christ, like we do. Elijah was not a son of God. Elijah was God's servant. It was different for Elijah. But let's look at how things are supposed to be in the New Testament after Jesus came. Turn to James chapter 1. Jessica, will you read chapter 1, verses 2 through 3?
My brother, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience.
Exactly. The trying of your faith works patience. And a lot of that is just because of the experience that you have, that you build up from having been through things and seen God work. I love how in the book of James, literally, verse 1, James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greeting, my brethren, count it all joy when ye fall into diverse temptations. He goes, hey guys, what's up? By the way, number 1, count it all joy when ye fall into diverse temptations. And the reason for that is because when we're in those situations, those are the ones in which we get to see God work. Turn to Acts, chapter 16. Here we have this sense in which I want you guys, while we read this record, to be thinking on the comparison between this record and what we just talked about with Elijah, and how Elijah reacted and responded. So, chapter 16, we're in let's start on verse 23. And when they had laid many stripes upon them, they cast them into prison, charging the jailer to keep them safely, who, having received such a charge, thrust them into the inner prison and made their feet fast in the stocks. We're talking about Paul and Silas here. And at midnight, Paul and Silas prayed, and sang praises unto God, and the prisoners heard them. And suddenly there were a great earthquake, so that the foundations of the prison were shaken, and immediately all the doors were opened, and everyone's bands were loosed. And the keeper of the prison, awaking out of his sleep and seeing the prison doors open, he drew out his sword and would have killed himself, supposing that the prisoners had been fled. But Paul cried with a loud voice, saying, "Do thyself no harm, for we are all here." There are a couple things that I can pull out of this, talking about, first of all, how incredibly honorable Paul was, that he remained where he was. And then beyond that, also, the ridiculous attitude that these gentlemen brought to bear in this horrible situation. Did you read in verse 23 with me when verse 22 actually, before we got started, the magistrates rent off their clothes and commanded to beat them, and then when they had laid many stripes upon them, they cast them into prison. So it isn't even like they're under the threat of being in a horrible situation. They've already gone through the horrible situation, and it's only getting worse. And they were able to face that with joy. And they were able to face that with joy because not only of their trust in God, but also with their confidence in being sons and daughters of Jesus Christ. You and me, all of us sitting here, we have that exact same opportunity because we all walk in the same spirit that Paul and Silas and the rest of the apostles did. And so we have an ability even beyond what Elijah did to do the right thing. We have an ability to do it